Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I want to share a story from my family's history that happened when my sister was 13. I'm the youngest of 6 siblings, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Our parents came to the United States from Zacatecas, Mexico in 1987, settling in south central Los Angeles, where some of my aunts and uncles were already living. My family has an interesting background. My uncles were involved with local gangs, and my oldest uncle is this incredibly talented tattoo artist. My dad wasn't officially in any gang, but he had connections and was well respected in the neighborhood for occasionally helping out with gang business. This all started at my cousin's birthday party. My uncle, being the generous guy he is, made it an open invitation. Anyone could come. Well, that wasn't the smartest move. My brothers, my mom and I weren't there because we were celebrating my aunt's birthday elsewhere, but my sisters went with my dad since they were close to our cousin. As these family parties usually went on until sunrise, my sister ended up falling asleep in my cousin's bedroom. The room didn't have a lock on the door. While she was sleeping, she woke up to someone touching her. It was my older cousin's boyfriend. He was 19 and my cousin was 17 at the time. My sister didn't tell anyone what happened for a month. When she finally opened up to our mom about it, I was so proud of her bravery. A lot of 13-year-olds would have kept that buried inside for years. Once word got out to my dad's side of the family, even my older cousin, the one dating this scumbag, was devastated but agreed to help set things right. She arranged to meet her boyfriend at this local park. My older sister told me what happened next. At around 9 p.m., my dad, uncles, and some of their associates waited at this dimly lit, deserted park. They had this friend called Big S, rest his soul, who brought his RV. When the creep showed up, my dad confronted him by asking if he enjoyed touching little girls. The guy barely got a word out before they grabbed him and dragged him into the RV. They took him to my uncle's place, the tattoo artist one. What happened next was something straight out of a revenge movie. My uncle had all his equipment ready. While the guy was unconscious, he gave him some special artwork, tattoos all over his face, neck, head, and hands. Each one spelled out exactly what kind of person he was. The centerpiece was this massive tattoo across his forehead that left no doubt about his crimes. Around 2 a.m. when he started coming to, they dropped him right in front of his father's house. Before leaving, my dad left a detailed note explaining everything this guy had done. My sister later told me that when she heard what they did to him, she felt relieved, like she could finally breathe again. The guy's own father kicked him out after finding him and reading the note. He crashed at some friend's place, but karma wasn't done with him yet. About a month later, he and 2 of his friends got arrested for a murder they'd committed 3 months before he attacked my sister. He got sent to Chino Penitentiary for second-degree murder and other charges. 2 months into his sentence, word got around that he didn't make it. Nobody was sure if it was because of those telling tattoos, but in prison, people who hurt kids don't usually last long. My uncle later commented that even if they hadn't done what they did, the guy was headed for prison anyway. They just made sure everyone would know what he really was. My cousin who had dated him took it hard at first. They'd been together for 3 years, and finding out who he really was shook her. But she knew we did what had to be done, and my sister powered through it all. She's in college now, studying at Cal State Long Beach, building a life for herself. She's the strongest person I know. My dad always says that in our family we protect our own. That's how it's always been, and that's how it will always be. You see, being 18 and seeing how my family came together, I understand why my sister gave me permission to share this story. I moved to North Carolina with my mom after my parents' divorce when I was 13. The change wasn't easy, leaving behind everything I knew in California to start fresh in a completely different state. My mom tried her best, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat, but the only school in our district was notorious for being one of the worst in the county. From day one, I knew I was in for a rough time. The teachers seemed checked out, the food was barely edible, and most of the students acted tough despite coming from comfortable middle-class homes. The only good thing was that my cousin attended the same school. We'd grown close since the move, and he became my only friend there. Two girls in particular made my life difficult. I'll call them Bully 1 and Bully 2. Bully 1 was the ringleader, while Bully 2 mostly played sidekick. They weren't the worst bullies I'd encountered, but they were persistent enough to make each day uncomfortable. Then halfway through the semester, a new student arrived. She seemed normal at first, quiet, studious, and kept to herself. But within a week of hanging out with Bully 1 and Bully 2, she transformed into something far worse than both of them combined. Let's call her New Girl. New Girl started small, copying homework, showing up late to class, and generally being disruptive. But it quickly escalated to physical harassment, getting other students in trouble for things she did, and making everyone's life miserable. Her mother was just as bad, a real piece of work who'd show up at drop-off and pick-up times just to cause drama with other parents and teachers. One day in English class, everything came to a head. Our teacher had stepped out for a few minutes to handle an emergency in the hallway, leaving us unsupervised. That's when New Girl and her friends started picking on my cousin. I usually stayed quiet during these incidents. My cousin was bigger than me and could handle himself, plus getting involved only made things worse. But this time was different. New Girl started taunting my cousin, asking if he was too stupid to talk back. My cousin just ignored her, which only fueled her anger. Then Bully 1 chimed in, suggesting that maybe my cousin needed some motivation to speak up. New Girl grabbed her pencil case, one of those heavy metal ones, and swung it full force at my cousin's face. The sound of impact made me flinch. I later found out it had left a nasty bruise that lasted for weeks. After the hit, New Girl called my cousin a horrible slur, mocking his intelligence. Something in me snapped. All the pent-up frustration from months of watching their bullying, all the anger at this terrible school, it all came rushing out. I waited until she sat back down, smugly checking her phone while her friends giggled. I walked over to her desk, calm as could be. When I tapped on her desk, she looked up with this annoyed expression that quickly turned to shock when my palm connected with her face. The slap echoed through the classroom so loudly that my hand stung afterward. The stunned silence that followed was deafening. New Girl sat there, mouth hanging open, while her friends stared. Without saying a word, I returned to my desk and continued doodling like nothing had happened. My cousin just gave me a small nod of approval. When the teacher returned, nobody said a word. Then New Girl's mother showed up at dismissal time and saw the handprint on her daughter's face. New Girl's mother started screaming at everyone around her, demanding to know who had hit her daughter. She threatened to get everyone suspended if nobody came forward with names. She kept ranting and raving about getting students expelled, but nobody who witnessed the incident was around except me. New Girl caught my eye during her mother's tirade, but quickly looked away. I think she knew she deserved what she got. I heard later that her mother stormed into the principal's office demanding punishment for everyone in New Girl's classes. But since the classroom didn't have security cameras yet, they were scheduled to be installed the following week. There was no evidence of what happened. After that day, New Girl never bothered my cousin again. She'd duck her head and walk the other way whenever she saw either of us coming. Her friends tried to keep up their usual harassment, but without their ringleader, it just wasn't the same. I've always struggled with my height. Being 4'11" means I have to plan ahead for any event where seeing over a crowd is important. This Halloween parade was something I've been looking forward to for months. My local community goes all out for it, with elaborate costumes, decorated floats, and performances that make it worth the wait. I work at the library, which probably tells you all you need to know about my personality. Quiet, reserved, usually buried in books rather than dealing with confrontation. But this parade was my chance to finally enjoy something without having to stand on tiptoes or crane my neck around taller people. I took the afternoon off work and got there 2 hours early, finding the perfect spot right at the front of the sidewalk. The excitement in the air was infectious as more people started gathering. Everything was perfect until about 15 minutes into the parade. That's when I heard her before I saw her. I heard her screaming and demanding people to let her through, insisting she needed to get to the front. She burst through the crowd like a rhinoceros with phone held high, shoving past everyone until she reached me. Without even acknowledging my existence, she stepped right in front of me, off the sidewalk, and started filming. I politely asked her to move, explaining that I couldn't see anything. She didn't even turn around. Instead, she started screaming at the parade performers, demanding them to wave at her camera and look in her direction. I tried tapping her shoulder and pleading with her, mentioning that I'd been there for 2 hours. Her only response was to shush me, saying she was filming. For the next 15 minutes, I watched the back of her bleach blonde head instead of the parade I'd waited hours to see. My hands were shaking, partly from anger, partly from the adrenaline of confrontation. But something in me snapped. If she wanted to film so badly, I'd give her something to film. I started quietly at first, muttering expletives. Then I got louder with more explicit language. She was so focused on her filming she didn't even notice. That's when I had my moment of inspiration. I shouted to everyone that the blonde lady in front of me had just expressed some extremely inappropriate desires involving parade clowns. That got her attention. She spun around so fast I thought her neck would snap. She started yelling at me about how she was trying to film. I sarcastically apologized about ruining her video and suggested she find another spot because I wouldn't stop. I even added that I knew lots more inappropriate things to yell. She started screaming, demanding to know if I knew who she was and explaining that she was trying to make content. I shot back that I was trying to watch a parade I'd waited 2 hours for. She continued screaming about her social media followers and the importance of her content, which attracted the attention of nearby parade security. A guard in a yellow vest approached and told her she needed to return to the sidewalk as this area was off limits. She tried claiming she was there first, but several people in the crowd immediately shouted out that she wasn't. When she tried to push her way back onto the sidewalk, the crowd had closed ranks. There was no space for her anymore. I could hear her throwing a fit as she stomped away, threatening to call the police and get everyone arrested. The security guard checked if I was okay, and I apologized for the yelling. He assured me not to worry, explaining they'd been dealing with social media influencers trying to get special access all night and that I had handled it better than most. I enjoyed the rest of the parade with a perfect view. Later that night, while scrolling through social media, I found her account. She had posted a rant about how some horrible person had ruined all her parade footage with inappropriate language. The comments were filled with people telling her she should have respected the crowd boundaries. She had to delete all her parade videos because you could clearly hear me in the background of every single one, sharing my creative theories about her interests in clowns. My voice had become the unofficial soundtrack to her Halloween parade content, and there was nothing she could do about it. Back in the 1970s, I worked at this warehouse that was basically a mess of mismanagement and entitlement. I started as a regular warehouse worker, but through hard work and reliability, I got promoted to managing my own department. It wasn't anything fancy, but I was good at my job and took pride in keeping things running smoothly. My direct boss was actually a decent guy who fought for better working conditions, but he eventually got so fed up with the higher-ups that he quit. Now you'd think they'd promote someone qualified to replace him, right? Nope. Instead, they split his job title and salary between two entitled jerks who spent most of their time drinking beer in their office, rather than doing any actual work. I ended up handling all my former boss's responsibilities without any recognition or pay raise. I would often vent about this to my sister, who was already familiar with the company's terrible customer service. She would share these stories with her husband, who then talked about it with his best friend. Keep this detail in mind. It becomes important later. One chaotic day, everything went completely sideways. One of the beer-drinking bosses was out for surgery, and the other one was losing it because his drinking buddy and secretary were both out. That's when I got the call. The beer-drinking boss demanded that I come handle his department immediately. When I told him I was already swamped with my own work and couldn't leave my department without coverage, He got angry and insisted it was in order. I reminded him that I've been managing my department without any help from them since my boss left. So if I could handle my work alone, he could handle his. He tried to call it insubordination, but I shut him down by telling him this was just called doing my job, something he should try instead of drinking beer. A few minutes later, a panicked warehouse worker rushed into my office. He desperately begged for my help, explaining that the boss was having some kind of attack. When I asked for clarification, he said he wasn't sure if it was a heart attack or a panic attack, but the boss was being taken to the hospital. So there I was, forced to run both my department and the entire warehouse operations. Running between areas, I discovered even more problems. Several warehouse workers were drinking and smoking Mary Jane on the job, damaging merchandise in their intoxicated state. When I tried to confront them about it, they turned threatening. One drunk worker warned me to mind my own business or I'd regret it, while another mockingly called me little lady and asked what I thought I could do about it. On top of everything, I had to deal with this incredibly entitled salesman. He was demanding a delivery happen that day because he'd promised it to his client. When I explained that the trucks had already left for the day and it was impossible, he insisted he didn't care and that I needed to make it happen, claiming it was my problem now. I had to tell him that no, this was his problem for making promises he couldn't keep. At the end of this nightmare day, my boss's boss came to the warehouse. He praised me for managing to keep everything running that day. I took the opportunity to ask if, since I've been doing my former boss's job anyway, I could get his position and pay. He actually laughed and told me they couldn't do that because I was a woman, but to keep up the good work. That was the last straw. When I got a job offer for double the pay a few days later, I immediately put in my 2 weeks' notice. Did they bother to send someone to train during those 2 weeks? Of course not. They just expected me to magically solve all their problems until my last day. After I left, they kept calling me. The former beer-drinking boss called asking where I'd filed the shipping records, and I told him it wasn't my problem anymore since I didn't work there. Then a former co-worker called asking me to explain the return system to the new guy. I refused, telling them they should have trained someone when they had the chance. Then, about a month later, my sister called me with the most beautiful karma story I'd ever heard. She was practically bursting with excitement as she asked if I remembered how she told her husband about all the drinking and drug use at the warehouse, and he told his best friend. When I confirmed I remembered, she dropped the bombshell. His best friend was actually the company president, and his brother was the vice president. They had made a surprise visit to the warehouse that day and caught everyone in the act. Turns out my complaints had made their way up the chain in the most unexpected way. The company president and vice president showed up unannounced and found the beer-drinking bosses drunk in their office, along with several warehouse workers high on Mary Jane. Every single one of them was fired on the spot. My sister told me they had to completely restructure the warehouse management after firing so many people. They even tried calling me to offer me my old boss's position, with triple my original salary. I just laughed and told them I was very happy at my new job, but thanks for finally recognizing my worth. Even if it took an entire warehouse of drunk and high managers getting fired for them to see it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.